Thanks very much, Moses. That was a killer introduction. My name is Kave, as Moses had said, Kave Bulambo, and I'm the founder of My Career Path. It's a career development platform, but also a recruitment agency for companies. So talk to me, companies, if you're here later. And I'm also delighted to really host this panel today on skills development and employment. This is something that is really critical for the continent, and I'm delighted to invite my panelists to join me on the stage to engage all of us in this conversation. So come over. All good? All right. So to start off our conversation this morning, I really wanted to start with a statement that was made by the African Union Youth Division. And it basically says that the heart or the potential of the African continent lies in the hands, the skills, the development, and the talent of its young people. Remember, skills, talent, and potential of its young people. And the reason why the African Union Youth Division sees this is because they really foresee an Africa which shares prosperity among its people, an Africa that really wants to unleash the potential of its women and young people, but also an Africa that reaches its full potential as a continent. And with that in mind, with that statement, I wanted us to draw deeper into the root causes, the issues, the challenges, the opportunities that we have right now on the continent in terms of creating jobs and empowering our young people. And in doing that, as I was reading, our panelists come from various sectors, and they'll be able to dive into the key specific areas that we will highlight. And I would like to start with Josephine Dao, who could tell us a little bit, first introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about the work that you do at the African Development Bank, and give us a little bit of a context of what it is right now in terms of jobs and skills development on the continent.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to be here. I work at the African Development Bank under a team called Jobs for Youth in Africa. And it is a bank-wide strategy to create 25 million jobs by 2025. And my focus is more on small, medium, and entrepreneurship development. I must say it's ironic to be in this room and to be sitting on this panel because when it comes to science, technology, and innovation, and when it comes to mathematics, that is where I failed in life. But that one F that I ever got in university was computer science. And so I got lucky in terms of when I was in school, when I started off my career, what was required out of me was knowledge of Microsoft Office. That's it. But now today's generation, the jobs of tomorrow, it requires more. We're seeing AI, robotics, fintech, blockchain, all of these, and technology as a whole is really mainstreamed in many key sectors that drive Africa's growth. And so for us at the African Development Bank, we're quite cognizant of the fact that today we have about every year 10 million youth that are entering the job market, and only 3 million jobs are created formally. So that leaves a 7 million job gap. And so as part of our strategy, we're quite focused in ensuring that we're creating our work, we're focusing our work around key sectors. It's, of course, agriculture, it's industrialization, and it's information, communications, and technology. And so I can dive deeper a bit later on in terms of the different programs that we've had, the different support that we've been doing and carrying out with our regional member countries. But I do want to leave you already with some quick facts, which is the fact that at the moment in Africa, studies around science, technology, and engineering is not something that most people are gravitating towards. If we even look at Burundi, only 3% of youth have chosen to focus in engineering or in science and in technology. In Morocco, there's better numbers. It's 12.8%. But all of these numbers are nothing in comparison to countries such as Germany, Austria, and Mexico, where it's above 20% that you find youth that are focused in science, technology, and mathematics. And so for us, we think it's key that in order for Africa's transformation and Africa's growth, that its youth must have the foundational knowledge of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to be able to, yes, secure the jobs of today, of tomorrow, but actually to be the creators and the drivers of jobs, to be the ones that are going to create the jobs that are going to transform the continent as well.
Thank you, Josephine. That was really great. And as you could imagine, we have a gap of 7 million jobs to create. And for me, it feels like we really need to do things differently. We need to think differently. And there are a few countries on the continent that are reinventing themselves, innovating on the idea of how to create employment. And I want Lutz Theo from Microsoft Africa to really give us an overview around the work that you're doing with Microsoft for Africa on innovation and technology, because I feel this is one potential where things are looking differently, or we're thinking differently of how to use technology to fill at least a part of the gap in creating the jobs that we need.
So I don't want to repeat our presentation earlier on. I assume that 80-90% of you were in the room. Let me start maybe still trying to answer your question with a bad news, good news statement. Here's the bad news. And by the way, I'm an educator in my background, so I'm actually a teacher in my background. After 5 years in Africa, I have not discovered a silver bullet where you would say, and everybody agrees, we need better skills, more skills, better training. If we only did A, B, C, that would solve the problem. It is indeed a really, really hard problem to solve. That's the bad news. And it's imperative to solve it because it's indeed a bottleneck to growth, job creation, you name it. But there's something good news as well. The dynamic of what it means to be skilled and highly employable is changing around the world. And I'm not sure whether you noticed, but in a wonderful country like Germany or the US, wherever, the dynamic is quickly accelerating. And there's something going on again that's really ironic. A lot of the advice that African decision makers, governments, ministries of education, educators get has been shaped and grown and established in decades of learning in those leading countries, right? So they visit Oxbridge, they come to the TU in Berlin, they go to MIT in the US, you name it, they see those wonderful facilities, they see the professors with tenure, everything is well established and expensive and hard to build, while the same institutions, if you talk to them, are trying to become more agile, are trying to actually kind of build different learning systems. But what we know nowadays is if you spend 6 or 8 years in education and hit the job market, literally what you've learned right then might not be relevant, and even if it is, it's probably already outdated in another 3 or 4 years. So for me, the good news for the African continent is it's a little bit the leapfrogging that we talked about early on as well. Don't copy what you think the US, Germany, England, Japan got right, because it might not be what you need or what the world actually will need down the road. So I'm very encouraged by the more agile things that we can do. We can talk a little bit more about the mix between technology learning and in-person learning, all that kind of things. But I think the disruption of the process of learning what we need to be successful in our lives is happening as we speak. And that gives the African continent an opportunity because we are kind of all in the we don't know for sure. Sorry, that's the shortest I can do it.
Oh, good. I just also wanted to ask you, for the work that you've done so far, are there specific numbers that you can tell us, okay, we've been able to equip a certain number of young people in this specific area?
I think the shortest I can say is we can brag, if you want to, about the millions of people that we touch through our online learning portals, and I showed some of them early on. But truth to be known, you're barely scratching the surface. Because at the end of the way, learning is a very interpersonal thing, and it has a lot to do with experience and motivation. So that's why we showed the examples that we had with the App Factory, the internship program, the volunteer program. Those numbers, unfortunately, count in the thousands. Would I brag about we touched a couple of thousand people in 1.1 billion people? Not really. But we can show that when we do that, real transformation is happening. How to combine the two and bridge them between the thousands and the millions? Haven't figured that out yet.
Okay, so basically we'll still have the challenge in hand. And one of the things that we've seen through the two conversations that we've had so far is that technology is still at the center stage. But there is one more specific sector that actually has the potential to absorb in entrepreneurs, create a lot of jobs for young Africans at the moment, and that sector is agriculture. And I would like Eric Young, who's the CEO of Green Tech Capital, to tell us a little bit first about what you do and also the potential that you see in agriculture.
So, thank you first for inviting me. And I think that, well, I will take the question the other way around to explain what we do, because somehow this is how we started. When you look at Africa and the potential of agriculture and the situation today in Africa, I think it's somehow shocking. In Africa, there is a lot of land, a lot of potential to produce, but anyway, we import a lot. And why? Because somehow the young generation have been moving away from agriculture. And it's even more shocking because if the agriculture was a little bit more developed in Africa, it will have an immense impact on the GDP of the different countries. But what's happening is that the new generation have another understanding. They want to make things different. They want to move into the technology. And I think that this goes together. This goes together. These young generations wants to implement solutions that they've learned in other countries, solutions that maybe they will share with their parents, uncles that have, used traditional methods in order to improve yield, to make more transparency, to allow that people can share more profit along the value chain. And hopefully, what I think that this is what's happening now, increase the value chain, because in Africa we have a very, very short value chains, and the ecosystem of agriculture are, I think that it's small farmers. They have big land, but they cannot take care of everything. But this to say that I think that the young generation, because they are part of this culture, have the beginning of the solutions, but they need to have also some complementarity with the technology, with certain knowledge that are abroad, so that they can improve. And I think that this combination is where basically, to go back also to the theme of this panel, is where you have the opportunity to bring in talent. Because it's by crossing those two universes that we will find this space where you have talent and opportunity. And in Green Tech Capital, basically, this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to invest in ideas of African, local, 90% of our portfolio are African entrepreneurs, people who are understanding the challenge of the country with a very strong understanding of the culture and the local context. And we are helping them to acquire the resources, the technology in other countries and other environments that will allow them to optimize their solutions and then create value in their environment. So we do investment to scale the business, but what we know is that we cannot do that by ourselves. We don't know, we cannot understand all the problem, but they know their own problem. They know exactly what they need, and we place them at the center of our strategy. And our role is to support them, bring them the team, the technology, the financing, so that they can create the solutions that will allow to address the challenge. And one of these big challenges is agriculture, and we've done it by supporting platforms that allow to solve the soil occupancy, the challenge of soil occupancy, the fact that people, they have not enough resources to harvest their whole land, and that's a waste of resources. So we will invest in those kind of structure, or some structure that will allow to give them access to a better transparency in the value chain, so that they can increase their revenue and then continue to invest, or new technology that will allow to process African-specific product, so that they can have added value product on the market and create additional value. So this is in a nutshell what we're doing and how we implement it in the context of agriculture.
Awesome, thanks. Just a show of hands in the room, how many of you are interested in agriculture? Awesome, that's great. Because actually the growth value for agriculture in Africa is predicted to $1 trillion by 2030. So if we really want to create jobs, opportunities, create a continent that is thriving on a shared economy of prosperity, then we should really be tapping into agriculture, right? And this bring me on to my next question to Stefan, who's the director at Impact, and Impact really supports young African entrepreneurs from across the African continent. First, you'll tell us a little bit about what you do, and I want to hear from you, what are the ideas that come through and the potential that they have?
Yeah. I like Lutz mentioned that maybe you're not so proud about touching 2,000 people. On the other hand, maybe we can be proud, depending on how we do it. Because if you touch them in a way so they become your ambassadors, they get the right mindset for them to develop further the culture of creating jobs, the culture of entrepreneurship, the culture of mentoring. Then I think you're into something. If the entire morning we heard a lot of amazing stats, first of all from Mervyn in the previous panel, and that is telling something about the complexity of Africa and what we are dealing with. Because there are many different programs going in to Africa, similar to ours, yours. But how far are we reaching? Are we thinking we are still only reaching the surface? And when we go out and meet the entrepreneurs, we also wonder, there have been so much support in Tunisia, for example. And how deep is it going? We're meeting entrepreneurs that still have a lot to learn, and they have been on many programs. So, I want to talk about Impact and how we work. We are a 5-year-old organization who are supporting entrepreneurial ecosystems. We do it with our mentoring program. That's the flagship that has been going on since the beginning, and I'm director of the mentoring program. But at the moment, we are developing other projects, and that is to get around the entire ecosystem. So there are spaces locally for entrepreneurs to work together. We have started a space in Tunisia, in Cairo, perhaps Ghana is the next place. We hope so. And then we are also getting into collecting data of the ecosystem on a city level. And that is to better understand what is needed here. Maybe we have a great program, but it doesn't work in Kenya or Nairobi as well as it works in Ghana. Or where could we go with our program next? So the mentoring program brings together entrepreneurs. We have an international mentoring program in West Africa, one in East Africa. We bring together entrepreneurs on an 8-month program. We identify great international mentors that are working with them face-to-face and on online calls, very intense during the 8 months. We start the program with a mentoring camp where everyone comes together. So here we are 40, 50 participants. Later in the program, we have our mentors visiting locally the entrepreneurs. And we end the program also with a camp. what we see there is when entrepreneurs come together and we work with them on the workshops that are opening the mindset, they start thinking differently. They start thinking, okay, we can work together. And maybe my business is, I'm struggling with my business because of something culturally. I'm not ready to think the new way. And the whole peer-to-peer and all experience that are combined in a camp really flowers there. So I think there's many ways you can learn. You can learn from your peer, you can learn from great facilitators, not only at skill or capacity building by doing lectures and workshops.
Thanks, Stefan. Now, ladies, the reason why I agreed to do this panel, and I'm really excited to introduce Joy Ten, who is the founder of the African Women in Europe. It's an organization really that empowers African women in Europe, and she's going to tell us a little bit about what the organization does and also some of the work that they've done so far.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Yes, my name is Joy Ten, and I'm the founder of African Women in Europe. Some of you probably are surprised what is African Women in Europe doing here and want to empower themselves and what they want to do. This is actually the untapped market of diversity and women and actually also men that we come together to empower each other in terms of to inform them, mobilize because they are everywhere in Europe. And once we mobilize the women, where we have done this for 10 years now, we have celebrated actually our 10th anniversary. Now we are the diaspora who are going to build our continent. And that is what is missing. And as I said before, and actually as Afrolynk says, we need a bridge. And the diaspora are the perfect model. We have the best of both sides. We know where Africa is and what it needs. And Europe, we've been here. And actually, it's not that I'm saying, for example, just mentioning it. We have members who are really into this business. So what they've done, especially in Germany, we have one particular member who went back to Kenya, where I come from. And she's doing renewable energy, taking investors back there and putting them to the right places. Because this is very important to work with the diaspora. They have done the research. They know exactly where things are. And not on top of that, we have members who actually train us as diaspora how to go to invest in Africa. What do I mean with this? Normally, we have been sending a lot of money in Africa, as you all know, our family, our education, but these are not well-used money. So what we've done, this particular person called Dr. Hannett, and actually based here in Germany, she actually trained the diaspora how to go invest in Africa and where. I come from Kenya, fine, but probably Kenya with the corruption or Nigerian corruption, go to my neighboring country, and I would go there and invest there. So she's done the research. So what we do, we are mobilizing organization, and we have really empowered ourselves. We are over 3,000 members all over Europe, and Germany is one of my biggest countries because I come from Germany here, and we are bringing up the idea that we have to change the continent, and we can do it. And not only us alone, as our motto is together we are strong, we are actually working together with investors directly and actually empowering them and also informing them as partnership, business concept and sectors in different directions. So now that we're talking about employment in Africa, this is something that I have passionate in because I have been working here in Europe, in Switzerland, in Novartis company, and I noticed 80% of the employees come from India in IT technology. And I was thinking, Kenya, we are really advanced. We have potential. We have, at the moment, with the network system, it's quite easy to work anywhere. So how did this happen? I've been working with the sectors of remote work, and this is something we need to empower, that you don't need to be in the location where the job is at the moment. As he said, the technology is gone very far, and we can actually be able to get people to work in Europe. This model is already existing in the US, and we need to have it here in Europe, especially in Germany. So many companies, so many sectors in the industry of technology, and they're missing jobs. They can't get right people to work on these sectors. And we have them in Africa. We need to empower, and the tools are there. There's quite, I've done my investigation. I'm looking for an investor ready to do in this direction, and I'm ready to show that it is possible to make sure that Africa is able to get the employment problem that we have at the moment. And I said problem because our people are educated. I don't know whether you talk to any African here. Some of them have 3 degrees because they really want to get a job, but they can't. But they keep changing the sectors because they think there's opportunity to do the job. And if I go to Kenya right now, I'm actually a minority, but I have the experience as a diaspora to link this information. So this is what we do as an organization. That's one part of employment. We are also in the agriculture sector. We are in health, in different sectors, and we are 10 years now, and we are ready to accelerate. Yes.
Thank you so much, Joy. I think in the previous panel, Ada did mention that we need to remove the mask or the veil that's around there in creating opportunities for women and girls. And I want to take on to this panel as well. And I'm going to start with you, Eric. Don't worry, it's going to be easy. I just want to know from your company's work, how much do you prioritize the inclusion of women's organizations into your projects and funding plans? And if you haven't, what's the future plan?
Okay. When she started, I knew it's coming. Okay, so the first thing that people have to know in general is that for most of the people who are working in Africa, culturally, we all know that when it comes to economy, women are better. I mean, this is no secret. Everybody will have been working with franchise in Africa. At the end of the day, people are trying to hire women to manage those franchise because they have more successful, more straightforward, more organized, etc. In our case, we have a portfolio. I think that we have increased the number of women in our portfolio. We had some issue at the beginning to find women entrepreneurs. Because I think that on the last 4 years, 3-5 years, there has been a momentum where a lot of organizations have pushed women to become, to develop their own startup, their own venture. And we see now a change, a very big change in that sense. So I think that if I look at this year, we have invested in, I think, 4 ventures that were led by women. And I will say that among them, we have, what the kind of venture they do, they have a very strong economic sense and a very strong social sense as well. So I think that this is what at our level we can do. We continue to push and look at women entrepreneurs because I think that as a criteria and from the experience that we have, we know that they are very determined. Sometimes it can be a good things and sometimes a bad things because, you need flexibility. But I definitely want to encourage women to continue to do that. I hope that there will be more, and I know that there will be more. So I feel that there's already a momentum. There is not so much that we can do except continue to invest in them and bring them the support that they deserve for developing their business.
Does that help? Well,
Yes.
I think we can work with that, right? For now, we can work with that. My next question will be for you, Lutz, and I want to know, in your plans, you've been working for a while with Microsoft for Africa, skills development for women and girls. Do you prioritize it? Do you have specific quotas? When you finish a certain program, you know how many women and girls have gone through your programs?
Excellent question. Can I start with my claim to fame? So before I started working for Africa, I ran a mid-sized team at headquarters in Seattle, and we were one of the small few teams where over 50% of the team members were female. It was helped by the fact that it was the training group within Microsoft that makes it easier to recruit. But I can tell you, Microsoft overall, we as for Africa, we are going out of our way with varying success on recruiting women. But here are 1 or 2 discoveries we made that actually might help you dramatically. The discussion about technology and STEM skills, and you name it, is artificially narrowed and makes it super hard to recruit broader. And here's what I mean. We all have, or many of us have this picture, when you talk about STEM, you're talking literally about a rocket scientist, someone that breathes and lives in math, someone that can really deep coding, all those kind of things. By the way, those people are really well needed. The problem is you don't learn that in a weekend. Right? You have to start really, really early to kind of get into this. And so if you have that analysis and you're trying to do something about it, you kind of have to think about fast forward, and hopefully in 10 years we will see the results. But again, technology currently is coming to our rescue. The reality is, I would argue 60-80% of the websites that you use every day are kind of gobbled together by people. They're not programmed anymore. Technology has advanced so much that there's now more understanding, a process flow, having a design view, those kind of things. If you are an ERP, enterprise resource management, the technology has advanced so much that you can actually stitch together functionality to reflect and improve the processes in your company. I could go on and on and on. So don't get me wrong, we still need people and will need people, both genders, that can really go deep into the systems and build those programs. But the programs themselves, cloud computing as well, it is amazing what you can accomplish today by understanding that technology and bringing and applying it to what you do. So let me tell you a story, the internship program that we commented on. When I'm in a country, I'm trying to meet with all the interns and the partners that we have. I was recently in Lagos. There were probably 30 or 40 of them. By the way, about 50-50 of the interns were male and female. Discussion, recommendation, what we should change, and you name it. And towards the end, a wonderful young lady in Lagos raises the hand and says, look, I just want to make sure you understand. When I applied for an internship with Microsoft, I was attracted by your name, by Microsoft as a career. I had no idea that I would end up with a local IT company in Nigeria, let alone one that actually does IT. I would have never, ever tried to get into that company. Now, 3 months into my internship, and literally she said, I'm as happy as a clam. I love what I do, I understand what they do, and I feel I can add value. By the way, she was one of the first women that actually did social marketing for that otherwise deep, rich technology company. They didn't understand why they needed someone for social marketing. So where I'm going with this one is, if we open our mind on where technology and what kind of technology skills are needed to transform businesses, I think it will become much, much easier to attract very different audiences to those jobs. But we have to change the stories we tell, because we actually scare people away by constantly focusing on the math genius or the physics rocket scientist or whatever.
I think women and girls are also interested in math and physics. I've seen that a lot of the time in my work of talent acquisition and skills development is that if we do not intentionally prioritize around diversity, it's not going to happen. Yeah, it's not going to happen. So we have to be proactively encouraging the idea and the mindset that women and girls need to be here, or people of color. So it's not just gender, but also other facets of diversity, right? And my next question is for Stefan. How many women entrepreneurs do you plan to have on your program this year or next year?
Yeah, we hope it could be 50-50. And in this year, we have almost 50%, I guess, in Kenya. But why is it different in Ghana? Ghana, Nigeria is a bit different. So it's a different picture. And that could be interesting to investigate. What is that difference that makes female believe that they can start businesses, or more females believe they can start businesses in Kenya, Rwanda and Tanzania than in West Africa? So, yes, we would love to have more female entrepreneurs. It's probably something that'll take a while. We see it also in terms of, and it's a change of mindset, and it's not only Africa. For us, recruiting mentors internationally and in Europe, we have a lot of male coming, I can be a mentor. I like to be a mentor. If I meet a very professional woman and ask if she wants to be a mentor, she's considered, can I be a mentor? It's not like the men going, oh, I can do that. Why is that? I say our steps are two. Meeting our partners and encouraging the female entrepreneurs we meet locally. Step 2 is encouraging more females to be mentors on the program. So when the female comes on our program, they're faced with female mentors as well.
Stefan, you are 100% right. The role model is really, really important. I forgot to mention is in the App Factory program, we're working with 2 local companies, one in South Africa called We Think Code, and the other one in Kenya called Moringa School, both of them founded by 2 female founders. The very moment, and both of them are developer boot camps, the very moment you have that happening, the girls that they are recruiting, the young people they are recruiting now have role models they can aspire to, so very important aspect.
So I'm guessing we're making progress, right? And there's hope and expectations, right? We will check that next year. And yes, you can add.
Obviously, now I can see that the male are trying to defend our positions, definitely. But I just want to say, I do very quickly, is that at the end of the day, what I believe is that everybody knows that we have to push for women, and there is a lot of organization, despite, because I've seen in the financial industry, you have a lot of support to help women entrepreneurs to go into entrepreneur. But what is most important is that those women entrepreneurs, when they become successful, and I want to underline what Lord says, that when they are successful, this is the only things that will push more than any program, because what they see is actually that it's possible. So I don't think that it will help to favor a woman entrepreneur that has not a chance to succeed, because that will also discourage others. I think that women wants to have this equality, and they have the capacity to go beyond a lot of men entrepreneurs, and those are the ones who have to push to succeed, so that that's create a momentum. That's I want to say that. I know we want to favor, but at the end of the day, the result will make the difference for all the others.
Thank you. That's great. I want to go back to Josephine, and she's working for a very great project at the African Development Bank, and it's called Jobs for Youth in Africa. It was started in 2016, and they have this ambitious goal to create 50 million jobs, but that is in a span of 10 years, right? So that still leaves us with only 2 million jobs more, per year. So we still have a gap, and I want to know from you, how are we going to fill that gap still, even with the 50 million jobs that you're going to create?
Yeah. So just to clarify, it's 25 million jobs? Okay. So just to clarify, it's 25 million jobs that we plan on creating, but making sure that we're enhancing the skills of 50 million youth. And as mentioned, we're focusing really on sectors that we feel are sectors of growth. And especially in ICT, we're launching now a program called Coding for Employment. And the idea of Coding for Employment is to make sure that the youth of Africa have the digital skills to take up the jobs of today and tomorrow. And actually going back on what we touched about, making sure that women are part of the equation and young girls are given the opportunities. We're quite deliberate in the recruitment of setting up these centers when we're recruiting that at least 50% of the students that are recruited are women, to ensure that they're given those opportunities. And so that's the work that we're doing on the skills side. But on the entrepreneurship side also, we feel it's quite critical to ensure that that youth are given really the power to understand that they can create their own jobs, that governments alone are not there to create jobs. And so a lot of our focus also is on private sector development and giving youth the right skills in terms of entrepreneurship skills. And for us, that means financial and non-financial skills as well. And in terms of capacity building, for us, we have a strategy of ensuring sustainability of all of these incubators, accelerators, hubs that we're seeing popping up left, right, and center on the continent. How do we ensure consistency of quality and the level of sophistication? Being that they are the ones that are helping produce and really shape the entrepreneurs who create their own jobs, but create other jobs for other youth as well. So we do provide a lot of capacity building and technical assistance to what we call intermediaries of the entrepreneurship space as well.
Thank you. Did you want to add something, Joe?
Yes. I wanted to mention that what she's doing is quite well. Something else, we also have to bear in mind that there are so many opportunities out there, and we need to make sure they reach to the right people. So if there is a gap, probably we are not using the media right. So we need to use our platforms that are broadcasting this information to reach to the right youth and the women as well. As I was talking about the tech, we have women, Tech Women Africa, which actually they have a meeting here in a few weeks. And these are platform that you could use and go to or be aware of what is around and be in the right platform. I have to be honest, Africa, they're all on Facebook. Unfortunately, that's where to trap a lot. It's not true, probably not, but some of them are in LinkedIn. But if you want to trap a lot of real people who are entrepreneur or youth, they are all on Facebook. I use Facebook. I had my own website, but I've noticed that all my women, and actually in Europe, and all those people I wanted to reach were on Facebook, and that's why I operate. Although people find Facebook not the right place, the entrepreneur actually in Africa, they're selling their products on Facebook. They don't have the website. And that's how we've also, as an African woman in Europe, we've found a platform called African Market in Europe, where they can now use our platform to broadcast outside because they can't be able to market their website if you don't have a platform. So this is something else. And I want to thank you all, the gentlemen, for putting women in the forefront. And I'll be sharing all this information with the African women in Europe because they also share them as well with the real African, with our members in Africa as well. So thank you for putting that. And I'll be following up on those comments you mentioned.
Thank you, Joy. I would love now to open. I'd love to open for questions now. If you have any questions to our panelists, this is your time now. There's one question there.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kwabna. I'm from Ghana. I'm an Impact Fellow, and I run a digital marketing agency in Ghana and also run a T-shirt company. We do African-inspired T-shirts. I wanted to ask a question to the panel about digital skills development. If there is funding for upskilling digital skills, our agency is really excited about training young people on digital skills. And if there is no funding, what other support can you give in that sense? And also, we print T-shirts. We train young people. We try to get them to stick to their jobs. And is there also any funding for artisanal type of jobs? So yeah, we're looking to help young people grow. Thank you.
Josephine, do you want to take that question?
So funding is indeed one of the main things that we keep on hearing from a lot of the young entrepreneurs that we speak to. What we're trying to do is to make sure that funding and access to financing is combined with technical assistance support. So that means also changing the idea of financial institutions, especially traditional financial institutions that are quite risk-averse when it comes to investing in youth in certain sectors as well. And that's part of our technical assistance program. And it can be as basic as giving technical assistance to a bank and teaching them how do you provide customer service to a young person when they walk into your bank. It can also be providing technical assistance in if you're a traditional bank that's never financed an enterprise in green technology, how do we teach you and how do we teach your credit officers to be able to evaluate such a project or such an opportunity versus just shutting the door and not giving youth that opportunity? And then, as my colleague Impara mentioned before, right now, at the way that we work at the African Development Bank, unfortunately, we're not able to directly fund entrepreneurs, being to the usual ticket size of our investments. But what we're making to ensure is that we're funding intermediaries. So we're trying to fund venture capitalists, private equity firms, non-traditional financiers that usually fund in early stage. And so that they are the ones, through that we can ensure that the funds are trickling down as much as possible to young entrepreneurs, young business, to newly established businesses as well.
On our side, we have mentorship programs. We've, at the moment, in the next level of giving mentorship. So we have members who are already in business, and we already started the program starting actually in September. Our own members will be trained how to mentor. These are 10-month program, and they will be training entrepreneurship also in Africa. So that's one thing. Financially, we'll be able to do that as a group, and we are working on that project. So mentorship for our side, our expertise here in Europe, because we have members who have companies. That's what we'll be sharing with the community out.
So to answer your question, one thing that is a reality is that the financial ecosystem is not made to finance those structures. I mean, this is the first point. The good news about it is that this financial system is made to finance bigger things. So from the moment you want to address this audience about the challenge of you willing to make a financing or looking for financing and support, I think that the biggest things will be to say that you don't want to be a company in Ghana who's just making one t-shirt. You're aiming to be the biggest companies in Ghana doing the best t-shirt in your field. Because somehow this will also allow you to have a bigger goal, a bigger perspective, and will give the opportunity to the financial industry to say, okay, there is a big ambitions, and there is space for our tools that unfortunately some of the institutions cannot change to help you to achieve that. And you will see that first you will adjust most of your strategy to this, most of your tools, and you realize that the system has made tools to allow you to grow big. So that's why I think it's all those program, mentorship, etc. I think it's a great things. But at the beginning, it's come from the target that you have and how big the target can be. So you should really aim at big project, because this is actually what's going to unlock all the system that is actually in place. That will be my best advice on what you're trying to do now.
Can I quickly add something as well? Funding is a really funny thing in Africa. One of my colleagues called it, there's a wall of money hitting Africa. There's actually more money trying to be invested in Africa than there's projects to invest in. The problem for you is they're looking for investments $1 million and upwards. What's really difficult is to get $5,000, $1,000 or something, i.e. micro investment. Microsoft is not a bank, we wouldn't go in that area, but what we do in Kenya, for example, I cannot come up with an example for Ghana. We're working with 2 banks where the technology that they apply helps them actually to go into micro investments. And there's one bank that we work with, they literally make micro investments to, in this case, mostly women, that get a micro investment via their M-Pesa phone in the morning, buy the produce, sell it in the market, pay back the next the same evening, and start all over the next morning again. The other bank is a newer foundation, a paperless bank that does the same with farmers. So the good news is, because technology makes the credit worthiness estimate, the follow-up, all the transactions so much cheaper and easier to do, that those micro payments opportunities are probably coming your way. But again, right now in Ghana, I'm not aware of one that I could just point you to.
Yeah, Lucy is right. The investment picture is changing at the moment, and that maybe opens up for opportunities with technology for smaller tickets. But there are many investors who cannot find the right startups to invest in. And therefore, I believe very much in partnerships. And like Eric's organization, via Moses, the founder of Afrolynk, has then been looking at our mentoring program. Are there entrepreneurs in that who they could invest in? So, today we have around 20 impact fellows. This marks the end of our program in our camp in Germany. And I know there are investors here, so come to us. And the more partners we can get in this way, I believe that the money can then go to the right ones, and that's a good way for investors. First of all, you are on our programs, or the fellows here are on the program, selected by more. There are 20 entrepreneurs selected by more than 280 startups. That's the first good step for an investor to take.
Wonderful. Wow. Okay. We start here and then move on there and then there.
Hello, my name is Shashi again. I had a question in relation to wages. So I know your African Development Bank is trying to make 25 million jobs in 10 years, yes? And unfortunately, our generation is the first generation to actually push their wages low with things like Uber or Uber Eats or Fedora like that, because people are getting paid less per hour just to do a little task. So my question is, as African Development Bank pushes towards 25 million jobs in 10 years, how are we going to make sure that our youth is employed with quality jobs, so they're not just working for pennies and they can actually have lives and a livelihood that allows them to have the kind of lifestyles that they would like? So we move forward as a continent.
So that's actually an excellent question. One of the things that we try and ensure in this job creation is this concept of decent jobs. And we're working closely with our social protection department, especially when we're giving investments to countries, to ensure that the right accompanying policies and frameworks are actually involved in job creation. And at the moment, a lot of our work also is towards ensuring that there's a transfer from the informal sector into the formal economy for youth. And so for us, that means that when we're targeting, especially, we talk a lot about unemployment, but there's also underemployment. And so we're quite cognizant of this in terms of our relationships with our regional member countries and our program designs and even who we target. So a simple example is part of the Jobs for Youth in Africa strategy. We have different flagship programs. And one of the flagship programs is called Rural Micro-Entrepreneurship Program. And there we actually only specifically target youth who are out of school, never been to school, that are in the informal economy and that are unemployed. And there it's to guarantee as much as possible that they're being transferred into the formal economy and are able to set up and have jobs of dignity and decent jobs as well. And then we do also a lot of work in terms of setting up industrial parks. So that's part of making sure that the innovation infrastructure exists in some of the countries that we're investing in. We've done this in Cape Verde, in Senegal. And so one of the key things there is to make sure that whatever innovation space takes place, or it actually yields an opportunity for job creation within the formal economy as well. And so a lot of this work, as I said, we're doing with our social protection team, but we're working also closely with the ILO, which really has an excellent framework around decent jobs, and especially decent jobs for youth.
Wonderful. This is actually really high policy level, right? And which has to translate way down into corporations. And I think at some level, we also need to request decent jobs, as young people being empowered to know what it is that is decent for you, what is that you actually want to do, and not just do anything for the sake of survival. But, it can be judgmental. But, yeah. Just behind Shashi, here, just behind her, there.
Thank you. I have one question concerning something that you have mentioned before. I think Lutz from Microsoft, you mentioned that it is not about the capital that is lacking, but it's actually the number of projects that you can actually invest in that is lacking. So from your perspective, do you think it is more an issue about the quantity of projects or the quality of projects that you see is not sufficient to actually accommodate all the capital that is going to be invested or is actually going invested in Africa? That would be my question.
I personally believe there is no final answer that is A or B. In fact, Stefan, you and I have to talk a little bit about the level of impact and what matters. Obviously, if you have one or two projects that really rock and are delight to see what's coming out of it, that's a wonderful thing, but it doesn't help you to actually initiate enough change. If you're skin deep, as I mentioned before, just touching a couple of things, then you never drive that change. I think what we're trying to do is basically find, again, multipliers that we can work with and invest in that then themselves go out. And I would actually agree with you. If we can have, in a country like Kenya, if we can have 10 companies that we work with, that themselves then again change behavior, that's a beautiful multiplying effect. And Amrote talked about M-Copper, and we're talking about creditworthiness. One of the things we haven't mentioned yet, M-Copper is in the business of providing solar power to the bottom of the pyramid, people that otherwise would never have access to electricity and so forth. In so doing, they actually created a credit worthiness system, because they have a pay-as-you-go model that they built. And if I get the numbers right, some 400 or 500,000 Kenyans are not credit worthy because they bought solar power from them, and in the process are now eligible for credits. That's a multiplier story that I would say we feel very proud of, because it really kind of drives the right behavior. So I think ultimately I agree with you, Stefan. It's not the question whether we have 1 million or 1,000 projects, but if the right ones happen that have multiplier effects, then I think we are accomplishing what we try to do.
Regarding the connection between the project and the money, but this is my personal belief, and I say that because, of course, it's not my money, but in general, I think that there is a lot of money who wants to go in Africa. And from what I see, a lot of institutions, and not because for anything complicated. It's just because if you look at the market today, the other regions, they cannot afford the opportunity that Africa can afford. It means that the same way the entrepreneurship are trying to reach out the money, the same way the money is trying to reach the entrepreneurship. The only problem is like it's really two different language and two different acceptations or needs. I think that there is also a lot of projects. The only problem is that we have to find a way to adapt to the African context. Because in the African context, it's not the big infrastructure. Because somehow African has bet on the leapfrogging, a lot of technology, all those new companies, etc. So the industry in Europe has been able to support with the infrastructure, etc. So when you come and you are in a country where you don't need that much infrastructure, you have to adjust your industrial strategy and your financing strategy to that. And it's also very difficult for the industry to say, we're going to finance all those small industry. Therefore, I think that it definitely makes sense what Microsoft are doing, what they are doing, and because it really helped to shape the mind of the entrepreneur, to get them closer to what the financial industry expect. And I think that also that the financial industry has and will adjust to new tools. I think that last time when the president of the African Development Bank came, he said that one of the biggest challenges that they have is to actually develop financial tools that can go to the entrepreneurs, but that can allow them also to create a profit out of those operations. So therefore I think that it's two worlds that are meeting at the moment. And there is some infrastructure, new model. We have developed our own by focusing a lot on the operations. But I'm pretty sure that there is other ecosystem that's going to develop to bridge that gap. So I stay positive in terms of what can be done for all those projects.
Thank you, Eric. We'll take one last question there, and I would encourage everybody who has a question to ask the panelists just after our panel, because we're running out of time. But we'll take one question there. Yeah.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I am Taku Machirori. I run a social enterprise in Zimbabwe called Emergination Africa. So I have a question revolving around education. In Africa, and I'll take sort of Zimbabwe as an example. Average age in Zimbabwe is 19, right? And Germany, it's about 46. And we came in with the model of, okay, we're going to come in with global competency, skills development programs, and roll them out into government secondary schools. But then you find that within the Ministry of Education itself, from the minister to directors, to teachers, to the training programs that train teachers, the mindset is not there. Right? I can come in with a program and say, hey, let's get young people ready for artificial intelligence and automation. But the curriculum itself is training them for careers of the past. It's an entire education. Like, for example, the teachers we work with, their training is based on Windows 97. So I'm trying to come and tell them, start using cloud computing and teach students how to use AI and all of this stuff. But what they learned is Windows 97, and they're not going to try and change. And when they have to do their reports to government, they have to be done on paper. So they would rather not use a learning management system, but use a paper-based system. So my question goes sort of mainly to sort of Microsoft and AFDB, because I'm a small guy, right? I can't transform all of education, right?
Don't underestimate yourself. Okay?
Yeah, but it's with African governments, you spend years, right, trying to drill it into them. It's really tough, yeah? So, you know, with people like Microsoft and people like AFDB, you guys have the clout, right? You have the networks. What are you doing to ensure that we tap these 19-year-olds while they're, not even 19-year-olds, these 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds that are still in high school, and now get them into the right trajectory in terms of the pathways that create employment or enable them to go into 21st century employment opportunities? How can we change the mindset within education through your help?
To finish our discussion with an easy question, right? Thank you. On a more serious note, I'll start with a short story. One of the most heart-wrenching recent discussions I had was with Well Told Story. I was there the whole day. It was evening. We had a dinner. And there were probably 20 people in the room, 18 of them, young, not even half the age that I am. And I came up with the question, tell me about your school experience. I couldn't finish the sentence before they all burst out, what a waste of time. And then everything else that I can't repeat. So I couldn't agree more with you. So what do we do now? Number one, I could give you now a long list of organizations, Microsoft amongst them, where we actually trying to influence how schools are being run and being governed. And we make small progress. So I can tell you about the digitization thing we've done with the Institute of Curriculum Development in Kenya. Rwanda is a very willing recipient, you name it. So there's a long list of things of successes. The biggest bottleneck, apart from funding, is actually teachers, which you pointed out. And there is, again, no silver bullet that we have found where you can just go in and say, hey, switch your mind, and then start doing it. So we have all kinds of programs, again, that we're trying to change the behavior of teachers. The good news is, I think we're making progress. The bad news is, it is darn slow. And then to your point, Cave, is, but you are not powerless. The opportunity today to get access to high-quality, transformative, really worthwhile knowledge has never been better. The stuff that I showed earlier on, and we're just one provider. I mean, you can go to others as well. We're just one player. I can literally give you access to content that otherwise 10, 15 years ago, you would have gone to MIT and TU Berlin or Munich University, pay dear money to get the same content. It often is the same teachers because of the MOOC model. If you have the willingness to invest in yourself, your opportunities to get to that kind of a knowledge has never been better. Start running circles around the teachers that are slowing you down.
Wonderful. I think that brings us to a really great closure of this discussion. And I really believe that even though we have the challenge, yes, one moment, even though we have the challenge to fill in the gaps of creating employment, I feel that within this room, on the African continent, there are future employers, future founders who will be able to tackle this issue at hand. And this panel just says it all. This room says it all. And maybe all of you, just two things, like one thing, your hope and aspirations about what we have at hand, what challenge, the problem that we have at hand. What is your hope and aspirations around the topic? Josephine and then Joy and Lutz. We go like this.
So my hope actually relates to the last question that was asked, is that there's more conversations between the ministries of education and the private sector. At the moment, the private sector is not helping design these curriculums. They're not involved in saying what their needs are in terms of recruitment. We're still using curriculum that we've inherited from our colonizers, mostly in most African countries. So it's time that the private sector is involved in saying what type of skills they need. So we're teaching African youth skills that makes them employable, and so we can fill this gap.
Thank you, Josephine. Joy?
Yes, and I couldn't agree that better, that we need to start thinking, design thinking. Where is the problem? I know we are all advanced now in Europe, but you need to go down to the ground, see what is happening right in the small schools, as he mentioned, the youth down there. Talk to the people who are there, and that's why I still insist diaspora are the key. They know where the problem is because they know where you can start at grassroots, really down. And we have actually, that's what I forgot, we've compiled a book as women talking about how it is in diaspora as also the way it is in Africa. If you want to understand the diaspora much better, I have a few copies with me. But let's get down to the problem. Design thinking, really, we are really up there. All this technology, all this stuff are very good. Even here in Europe, we realize there's so many also people who cannot touch a computer. I mean, why are we heading so fast? We need to get down to the problem. What is the problem? Let's get down to those problems first.
Thank you, Joy.
We really hope that some of the seeds we are putting in right now really blossom. That can be in economically, because the companies are successful. That can be in education, we see the change. That can be politically as well. We have a wonderful team member, Thembile, in South Africa, who's getting more and more into politics, because it really kind of rubbed us the wrong way, that we hear them complain about what's wrong, and instead of changing it. So I wrote actually an email to her yesterday, and I said is because she asked for a special leave for a political boot camp or something. And I said to Thembile, by the time you become president of South Africa, I will apply for South African nationality. And so I'm still waiting for that to happen.
I really like the last question, and I think that's the route to the change, because the mindset has to happen, the change of mindset has to happen earlier, much earlier. So maybe we are coming with our programs, but the mindset, how people are getting taught in Africa has to start from much earlier. I believe Africans has more entrepreneurial mindset in general than we have, but it's not helping with the educational system they have at the moment.
Well, Eric.
For me, I have only one aspiration, which is related to perceptions. We cannot expect other people to perceive us differently if we cannot perceive ourselves differently. So I really think that if I had an aspiration, is basically that African entrepreneurs perceive themselves as successful leader entrepreneur. And then at that moment, all the market around will adjust to what they want to be. And if we change that, you will see it definitely make the difference, because you have several examples of people who start from nothing in Africa and have been very successful. And if they can do it, I assume that most of the people, they can do it. So for me, my aspiration is really that not that we look outside, but we look inside and we change our own perceptions, and that will impact everything else.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, with that in mind, we're closing, and I guess it's Believe You Can, and you're halfway there. Yeah, thank you.